The Titanic, the world's largest and most luxurious ship of its time. The Titanic set sail once and for all from Southampton, England to New York City on April 10, 1912. It was being commanded by 62-year-old senior captain Edward John Smith. There was a lot of excitement regarding this ship among passengers, public and even media. It was not only the world's largest ship, around 882 feet long, 92 feet wide, 175 feet tall and with a volume of 46,000 tons, and it was also one of the most luxurious ships. At that time it costed $7.5 million to build the ship, which is equal to $400 million today, more than 3,000 crores in Indian rupees. The facilities and decoration inside the ship was even better than any 5-star hotel. Grand staircase, a heated swimming pool, a Turkish bath, a gym, 4 restaurants, 2 barber shops and even a library. But 2 days after its departure on 12th April 1912, the Titanic began to get its first ice warnings. The Atlantic Ocean that the Titanic was crossing in order to get to America was filled with mountains of ice that were a danger to this ship. After getting these warnings, Titanic changed its direction twice to avoid the danger, but it did not reduce its speed. It continued its journey towards the destination at a speed of 21.5 knots, which is around 40 km per hour. 2 days later, on 14th April 1912, there were 7 more ice warnings, but Captain Smith and its crew just ignored these warnings. They did not slow the speed of the Titanic. At 11:39 p.m., a man from the crew named Frederick Fleet noticed a huge iceberg in front of the ship. He rang the bell twice quickly so that the people below could be alerted, then picked up the call and called the officer in the charge. First Officer William heard the message and sent a signal to the engine room that the ship should be steered in the left direction. But unfortunately, it was too late. Just 1 minute later, at 11:40 p.m., the ship crashed into the iceberg. By 2:20 a.m. in the early morning of April 15th, the biggest ship of its time had completely disappeared under the ice-cold surface of Atlantic Ocean. The Titanic took more than 1,500 lives with it, and the cause of this horrible disaster taking so many lives was an iceberg. Everybody is familiar with the Titanic story. It has been told a million times. You must have watched documentaries, movies, YouTube videos and whatnot. But today we'll discuss the main reasons of this disaster and the hidden mysteries behind this incident. It took 3 years to build and less than 3 hours to sink. The most iconic shipwreck in history, the Titanic. It weighed a record-breaking 46,000 tons and was built by some 15,000 people. Ironically, the ship had the best safety features of its time. That's why people just believed the ship was unsinkable. There were 2 main safety features why people believed so. First, the ship had a double bottom hull. The main body of the ship is called the hull. A double bottom hull means 2 layers. Even if the first layer is damaged, the second layer could save the ship. Second, the hull of the ship was divided into 16 separate watertight compartments. Even if 4 out of 16 compartments were filled with water, the ship still won't sink. The ship was designed in a way that it will never sink. तब के लोगों का ये मानना था कि ये ship कभी डूब ही नहीं सकता. White Star Line was the name of the company that built the ship. They have been building ships since 1861 and they were the best in the business. It was designed and built by an incredibly experienced team of engineers, builders and artisans. The vice president of the company was so confident that he came out in public and declared the ship is unsinkable. And because of this overconfidence, during its voyage, there were no passenger safety drills. Passengers were not given any instruction of where to go or which lifeboat to use in case of emergency. But there were not enough lifeboats to begin with. Only 20 lifeboats were available instead of 64, which was enough to carry just half of the total passengers and crew. Bruce Ismay, the owner, thought having 64 lifeboats would make the ship look too cluttered and less elegant. Now let's go back to the night when Titanic crashed with the iceberg. The iceberg was not a small one. It was as big as a football field and was almost the same height of the ship. Scientists estimate the iceberg weighted as much as 1.5 million tons. Titanic's front right side collided with the iceberg. As I told you before, the bottom part of the ship had two layers, but the impact created by the iceberg was on the side of the ship, which only had one layer. And the impact was so big that 6 out of 16 watertight compartments were filled with water. 20 minutes after the collision at 12 am, Captain Smith ordered his crew to send a distress call over radio. 20 minutes later at 12:20 am, there was a ship called RMS Carpathia that was present near the Titanic. The operator spoke over radio and Carpathia was on its way to save Titanic. But there was a problem. Despite it was closest to Titanic, it was 107 kilometers away from it. Even if it moved towards Titanic at its highest speed, it would reach there in 3.5 hours. Can the Titanic survive for 3.5 hours? The rest of the crew members lit up flares and rockets in the sky in the hope that a ship nearby would notice them. But unfortunately, apart from Carpathia, no other ship responded. Meanwhile, Captain Smith ordered to evacuate the passengers using the lifeboats on the ship. As per protocol, women and children would be given preference to board the lifeboats. But still, the passengers on the ship were not that scared. Most of the passengers believed that the Titanic was unsinkable and there is no need to worry. हाँ, किसी आइसबर्ग से टकरा गई होगी लेकिन डूबने तो नहीं वाली. For this reason, the first lifeboat that went down had the capacity of 65 people, but only 28 went on the lifeboat. Half of the lifeboat was empty. With time, the compartments started filling up with water and the ship began tilting. Gradually, the passengers started realizing that the ship could indeed sink. When they realized the seriousness of the situation, there was chaos and people began to run around in panic. By 1 at night, so much water has filled the front compartments that the bow of the ship had gone underwater. Due to this, the rear part of the Titanic came out of the water. The propellers at the back surfaced out of the water. People began to fight with each other for seats in the lifeboat. As I told you before, the problem was that there was a scarcity of lifeboats on the ship. There were only 20 lifeboats which could accommodate only 1200 people approximately. But there were around 2200 people on the ship. At 2:05 am, the last lifeboat was lowered from the Titanic, but 1500 people were still on the ship. Some people tried to escape, but some people accepted their fate and stayed back in the ship.
There was something about the Titanic. It was so very formal. It was so stiff.
Looking over the side, I saw the boats being lowered for the survivors.
Well, they never spoke, you see. There's women and children in the boat all night.
The ship broke into two pieces at around 2:20 am and slowly began to sink. It didn't even take 3 hours for the Unsinkable ship to sink completely in the ocean. Of all the 1500 people on the ship either drowned with the ship or were killed by hypothermia. The temperature of the water was -2 degrees Celsius. If you fall into water at that temperature, you would die within minutes due to hypothermia. It is said that the captain of the Titanic, Edward Smith, was on the wheel until his last breath and drowned with the ship. Some even believe that he committed suicide by killing himself. The ship RMS Carpathia reached the location around 3:30 to 4 am, but it was too late. But they saved around 700 passengers who were on the lifeboat. After the disaster of Titanic, questions were raised. Many controversies took place. Investigations were conducted and many unknown facts were revealed that shocked everyone. How would you feel if I say there was another ship just 37 kilometers away from the Titanic that night, which could have saved the passengers of the Titanic? It is true, the ship was SS Californian. 1 hour before the Titanic hit the iceberg, they even sent the last warning to the Titanic about the icebergs around them. After that, at 11:15 pm, the radio operator on the Californian ship switched off the radio. Why? The reason is still unclear. The Californian did not even respond when the rockets and flares were lit up. It is reported that after 12 am, the crew members of the Californian has actually seen the rockets and flares lit by the Titanic, and they even informed their captain Stanley Lord. But the captain said that कि Titanic में अमीर लोग travel करते हैं, ये कोई important situation नहीं होगा, ये कोई emergency नहीं होगा, वो लोग just party कर रहे होंगे. If Captain Lord had taken the rockets and flares seriously that night, a lot of people could have been saved. Next morning, when they switched on their radio, they received SOS calls from the Titanic. They reached the side, but it was too late by then. They only found dead bodies floating in the water. This one disaster changed the ship industry forever. Many new regulations and standards were set up to avoid these kind of disasters in the future. For example, a lifeboat regulation was framed mandating that the ship should have a sufficient number of lifeboats for every passenger. In 1914, an international ice patrol was set up so that the upcoming ships could be alerted about the icebergs in their paths. When the Titanic sank, it took 70 years to find its wreckage under the sea. In September 1985, an American ocean explorer, Robert Ballard, and a French oceanographer managed to find the Titanic under the sea. Its wreckage was found 3,800 meters under the sea. Two separate pieces of the ship were found 600 meters apart. Today, after more than 100 years of the disaster, the environment has started to erode the ship lying underwater. It is reported that the bacteria and other organisms under the sea are actually eating up the metal framework of the ship. It is expected by 2030 the ship will completely disappear underwater. Over the years, there have been so many conspiracy theories about the sinking of the ship. Some believe that the ship was intentionally sunk by none other than J.P. Morgan to eliminate all the millionaires on the ship, that he also paid the captain of the Californian to not help them. Some believe that the ship was cursed, and some believe the Titanic never sank, it was the Olympic, which was the exact replica of the ship. We still don't have concrete evidence of what's true and what actually happened. But even after 110 years, the fascination of Titanic among us people have never faded. So much so that recently a company called Oceangate started underwater tourism to see the remains of the Titanic. But they faced the same consequences. All the people on the submarine faced tragic death. Watch this video to know the full story. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.